Welcome to Wealth Mavericks. On today's episode, we're talking about the kind of mastery that takes years to build and what it looks like from both the outside and the inside.
Understanding that it's actually an asset structure issue, not necessarily a tax problem. You have an asset problem. Education, application, execution is the model that we follow because we don't ever want to ask people to execute that which they don't understand.
Welcome back to the podcast. I'm joined again by Joe, and I read a little story recently that has really stuck with me, and it's about Picasso and how he was walking in a market one day when a woman approached him, and she pulled out a piece of paper and she said, "Mr. Picasso, I'm such a fan of your work. Could you do a little drawing for me?" And he took the paper, he quickly drew a small, beautiful piece of art on that piece of paper and handed it back to her. And he said, "That will be $1 million. And she said, "Mr. Picasso, it only took you 30 seconds to draw that little masterpiece." And he smiled and said, "Oh, on the contrary, it took me 30 years to draw that masterpiece in 30 seconds. So, of course, the moral of this story is it takes many years to make something look easy. And we're going to talk a little bit about our CEO and founder today, Bob Wolf, because he doesn't have quite 30 years of experience, but he does have about 25. And he has spent all those years working toward what we have now at Terra Firma. And Joe, in our view, I think every day we look at it as we're building a masterpiece and we're working really hard to make it as streamlined and polished as possible. And you have shown our team a photo that I have saved and shown other people of 3 rockets. And I think we'll have Kenny bring it up here so that people who are watching can see what it looks like. And I want you to tell us about that. And I also want you to give us your perspective on what we're building here, because your perspective is the most unique. You were a client of Bob's first, and now you're his partner. So you've seen both sides of it. But first, why don't you tell us about this picture of the 3 rockets?
Yeah, and thank you. I love that picture. So they're the Raptor engines that are in Elon's rockets, and it's the actual engine, that is made up. And so you'll see Raptor 1, and Kenny, you'll put the image up now so people can look at this, but you'll see on the left-hand side of this picture, Raptor 1 engine, and it's cool looking. There's a ton of parts and all this. It looks very chaotic to me because I'm not a rocket engineer, so I don't know what I'm looking at, but it looks very chaotic. The second iteration, Raptor 2, is much more streamlined, and you see some cool, different elements that are in there. And then you move over to Raptor 3 and it's so simple. You're like, there's no way that everything that was on that left one is all in that right one. But it's really sleek. It's really unique looking. I don't know what Raptor engine 4 is going to look like. Maybe it's just like one thing and it just does all of it. I don't know. But there's obviously iterations that people go through. And if you could have started with Raptor 3 engine, that would have been ideal. But there's a lot of things that you have to figure out and test and move through. And so I think that's the same with any company. Honestly, it's the same thing with a lot of things in life. Try a lot of things to get to where you need to go. Elon's also notorious for, what's his quote? Don't optimize what should be deleted. Right. So it's like there are some things where it's like, no, that's just adding chaos. Like, delete it. Don't even refine it. Just delete that whole section. And I think especially the uniqueness of what we are doing at Terra Firma is something that I think very few institutions ever try to even accomplish. It's so much. There's a reason why this financial services industry is so siloed. It's so much easier. And to be honest, at times I look at our business and I'm like, why don't we just be a traditional AUM? Let's go collect AUM. We'd make a lot more money. It would be so much easier. But ultimately, what Bob and I keep coming back to is that's not what serves members the best. And so we are working as hard as we can to get to that Raptor 3 engine. I'd say we're still probably Raptor 2 right now.
Sure.
But the plans of what we have coming up for what will be our version of Raptor 3 engine are so exciting, but it is a lot of hard work. And that's where, Bob, using the knowledge that he's gained over the years, it just blows my mind. Every time I'm on a meeting with him and a member, I'm just like, you're a savant. Like, I don't even know how you remember these things. But the truth is he's instilling those knowledge bits into the systems that we're creating. So yeah, and funny enough, Erin, Bob was actually a client of mine before I was a client of his. So
Oh,
Bob
yeah.
was a cold call that I made when I was building my last company, and it gave me a very unique perspective into Terra Firma because I injected myself as a consultant into the business to try to figure out how do we sell this thing that you do. And that was pre-Raptor One. It was a totally different engine. And honestly, we failed catastrophically. We were not able to sell it. Ultimately, he fired me in the nicest way possible. He was basically like, "Hey, this isn't working. I love you to death, but like, this isn't working. Can we just part ways?" And I was like, "I've given it my all. Like, I didn't hold anything back. I'm happy to walk away." We
Mm.
remained friends. And then a year later, I reached out to Bob, and this is to your point. I reached out to Bob because I said, "Hey, you were starting to work on this membership concept, and do you think we'd be a good member for you?" And he said, "I don't know, let's chat." And so we had a chat, and I was blown away by what he had already created to that point. And I said, "This is a no-brainer. I'm in." And he helped a ton. And then when I sold that business, that was kind of his question, is what do you want to do next? And long story short, we decided to go into business together. And then I feel like, for whatever reason, I think it was like truly like divine providence. I think it was like God's blessing. And it was like the two of you, the way your two brains work together just created this magic.
Mm.
And so I think that's kind of what's allowed us to the combination of my understanding of human psyche and how people make decisions. And then his knowledge of how do I combine all these tax and wealth strategies together, and the vision that he and I have shared together was just so aligned. So I hope that, and I see our members on a regular basis, they're just like, we've never experienced this. This is what we've always wanted. It's just, we never thought this was, attainable. And so I think the byproduct has been really, really cool.
It has been an awesome thing to witness, from my part, just how yin and yang you both are. And each of you on your own doesn't have the whole picture, the whole thing. But um, to for you to come in and help Bob really materialize this vision that he has had for so long and
Yeah.
just didn't quite know how to deliver it. And then you brought the coaching and the softer side, the more human side to all the numbers and strategies and everything that he has dove so deep into for so many years.
Right.
So you had some bad experiences as a business owner with previous CPAs, missing things, paying too much in taxes, whatever it was. So what was so different about Bob when you worked with him?
Well, candidly, like right off the bat, we just had bookkeeping issues. We had been charged, I think it was close to $30,000 for kind of like, I'll call it just like BS stuff. And I was like, this can't be right. Like, I just felt like there's no way this is correct. And when I ran it by him, Bob was like, "Oh yeah, we could do that." And like, he kind of took over, and just, I felt like for the first time, again, from a holistic perspective, Bob has
Mm.
titled himself asset coach and tax strategist. And so he just looks at the world differently. Assets being your business, your investments, whatever it might be, all of the assets. So I felt like he was able to very quickly come in. Again, that Picasso drawing is a great example. In like 30 seconds, does this drawing, and it's like, whoa, how'd you do that? And why is
Mm.
that worth $1 million? Well, I mean, it's just all this knowledge that he's gained over the years, and what we're training our staff to be able to do is to be able to regurgitate those experiences that he's had for each of our members. So that was the biggest thing, is I felt like he was the only human being who was looking holistically at our business and our life to ensure that we got what we needed to get.
Hmm. So what do you think in particular he makes look easy that really isn't? Because I mean, a lot of our members have been on meetings with Bob. A lot of our listeners have probably seen Bob videos. He's got
Mhm.
his own YouTube channel, and he does make it seem so easy. What do you think is behind that?
I think one of Bob's unique abilities is to understand what the common issues are, the true issues, not the symptoms, the true issues, and then dive into solutions to those issues. Again, if you talk to most CPAs, what are they focused on? Tax. They're focusing on tax. And honestly, most of them are looking in the rearview mirror. They're not even looking at strategies. They're just looking at tax. And what Bob noticed is like, it feels like everybody's got a tax problem. All these affluent people have tax problems. So he went to the code itself, to the IRS or the IRC code, and is like, this is where the solutions are. And he was able to follow the breadcrumbs. Like literally the Internal Revenue Code, like leaves all the bread. It actually talks about examples. For example, this, and for example, that. And he's like, okay, cool. Let's take these examples and put them together and let's create a solution. But then understanding that it's actually an asset structure issue, not necessarily a tax problem. You have an asset problem. And so, and the other unique ability that Bob had, and this came up yesterday on a meeting with a client, they were like, he had a Northwestern guy. He's like, my Northwestern guy's been trying to explain this to me for years, and I didn't get it until you just said that. Bob has a way of communicating things that makes it easier to understand. I felt this personally. Like I was a business owner who had no idea on the tax side. Like it was all gibberish to me. I'm like, my 1040 and my 1120S and my blah, like all these. I'm like, I don't even know what any of this means. Just I'm getting screwed. That's all I know. And Bob just has a way of breaking things down to where someone can understand it. And probably for most of our members, it's the first time that someone's explained it in a way that makes sense. Their current team, I mean, if I'm using the Raptor engines, it's like they're not even at that level. It's so complicated. I think our members feel like it's just a mess. I don't know what to do with any of this. I just have this hodgepodge of advice. And Bob just has a way of very quickly understanding that whole scenario and going, here's what you need to do moving forward.
Yeah.
So,
and they're the ones, the member or the listener, they're the only one trying to coordinate all these professionals and be the middleman and speak a language that they don't even speak.
yes.
So then talking about the client we met with yesterday, that's been his continuous frustration. And we've been able to step in and be the middleman where needed. But now we've got the whole team of professionals to serve him in a way that he understands. And it is such a breath of fresh air. Another example I can think of is just in Discovery, where we walk you through your tax return and show you side by side. And I've had so many people say to me, wow, no one's ever walked me.
Yeah.
Like I've done my taxes for 20 years. No one's ever walked me through a tax return before. And what each thing means and what's causing like they just learned so much in that first meeting. So what is that worth?
Right. Well, and I would say the DNA of Terra Firma is trifold. We are all about education, application, and execution. Education is what Bob's been doing for years and years and years. I mean, you watch his videos going back, he's just trying to educate people. He has a heart for people to understand what's going on. So that's one really important, like that's part of why we have this podcast. We try to explain these things. So education is really important. Most doctors are left in the dark and there's like, I guess I just have to trust this team. And I think that's total BS. Like these are very, very intelligent people who can understand these things when presented properly. So education, core foundational principle to what we do. Application. How do we apply that education to your scenario, doctor? How do we intake all of your information, whether it's your tax return and see, okay, here's where this makes sense, or it's once someone, goes into phase one, where they submit all of their documents to us and we make sense of all of it and say, here's how we apply this education to your scenario. And then the next step, obviously, for our full-blown members is execution. So very specific instructions. Move this money to this account, move it from here to there, whatever it might be. So education, application, execution is the model that we follow because we don't ever want to ask people to execute that which they don't understand. That requires a level of trust that's undue. I just saw an article, this was 2 or 3 days ago, Kathy Ireland, right, had amassed this big fortune. She is now in a lawsuit with her team that was taking advantage of her for years, unbeknownst to her. And now she's left with a bunch of debt and no assets. Wow. That's tragic and avoidable. So again, that's why we believe in what we do. Education, application, execution. Don't execute if you don't understand.
Totally. Full transparency every step of the way.
Yeah. And by the way, if your advisor can't explain it, it's probably because they don't understand it either.
Yeah.
Right.
So Bob's knowledge and many years of experience is our foundation at Terra Firma. And now as we're growing membership, serving more people, getting into more assets, all the things, expanding the team, that comes with its own set of challenges. Now we have to put the systems and processes and people in place to be able to execute all of this in the execution stage. So you've had a big hand in that. What would you say are the biggest challenges and the biggest rewards that have come with that journey so far?
The obvious big gap is how do we employ great humans who then employ great AI and the things that we're doing. So the challenge is, how do we take Bob's brain and put that into our systems? And we use a lot of AI to do that, thus reducing the costs so that we can truly be, we've talked on this channel before a lot about the family office structure. Normally it's astronomically expensive to have a family office, but the tools that we use and the personnel that we put in place to use those tools allows us to serve members at an unbelievable level without the intense cost that would normally be associated with that. So we've taken, the 2.5 decades of Bob's brain, and, I'm also a licensed financial advisor, fiduciary. And so combining our knowledge to say, this is the system to be able to deliver this. By the way, that's been a big concern up until probably the last couple of months is, God, like, what if Bob ends up in the hospital or, God forbid, dies? What happens to all of that knowledge? So I feel a severe weight on my shoulders to, how do we get Bob's brain into our systems so that he doesn't have to be there? And we're actually really close to that moment right now. So it's fun seeing our team taking these models and taking these systems and employing them for our members, and they're generating equivalent advice to what Bob would have done. So the systems are kind of like Raptor 2, maybe getting close to Raptor 3 engine, is just the refinement of those things. And lastly, also is simplifying things. So simple is a lot more difficult to attain than a lot of people would recognize. So sometimes I feel like our advice, we're taking holistic viewpoint and simplifying it for our members. And it's like, well, that feels really simple. Yeah, it should feel that way. Complex is not great for you.
I mean, our meeting times have gone down. Our discovery has gotten more efficient. Our phase 1, everything has gotten more efficient. And that has been so rewarding to see, because as we say often, time is our most precious resource. And when we're doing these things the first few dozen times, it's like a huge lift. And then as we do it again and again and again, it's like the path is now paved. The conveyor belt is there. You just need to step onto it and let us hold your hand through it. And that feels really good. And something I say to members a lot is, like, as parents, your third kid gets a different experience than your first kid does. You just learn a lot and you get better at things. And our very first members got a different experience than now our new members who are coming in. Same with the people who find us 2 years from now. They will get an even better experience. But aren't those the type of people you want to work with, who are here showing up every day, focused on continuous improvement and being the very best you can be this day? You know, that is what we're dedicated to.
I think it's important, like from day one, like our main drive for the members that came on was like, how can we organize your assets in such a way to get tax savings? So we've been able to deliver that from a structural standpoint from day one. But I think also as we started opening our members' eyes to what's possible, like this is what's possible, they started going, well, that's what I want. And we're like, okay, we're working tirelessly to make that happen, but we got you what you signed up for.
Totally.
So I think that's really critical for people to understand. And this might be, for doctors themselves, like in your own career trajectory. If you're 20 years in and you've done a surgery, 10,000 times, you are much more skilled today than you were on day one. It doesn't mean you have any more or less passion. It's just you know what you're doing to a mastery level. That's what we're working towards. It's kind of that unattainable, the impossible goal of mastery. But even though it's impossible to get there, we are going to find excellence along the way. And I do think that any member who's been with us for years will attest to, we've gotten sharper and better every iteration that we've done. So,
and we just won't stop.
And we'll never stop. That's the cool thing about it.
Yeah. I love it. Well, thank you for sharing all that, Joe. Doc, we hope that you can feel our heart and our passion here. We love what we get to do. We are always trying to be better. And if you feel like your plan is disjointed or you're paying too much in taxes or whatever, like, we are here. We are your solution, and we would love to work with you. So get in touch. Thank you for listening. Join us next time. And until then, go be a wealth maverick.